Like there's no reason. I've done that elsewhere. And so if something's funky.
Okay. Yeah, and it could be me. Like I said, I have a new machine here. But anyway, recording in progress. Let's get things started. Hi, welcome everyone. Welcome to another episode of the OpenJS Foundation's Cross Project Council meeting. Today is the 2nd of April in the year 2024, the future. Let's see, where do we start again? How about announcements? Is that where we are?
Sure, I have a couple this week. So tomorrow, what is tomorrow? Wednesday and Thursday is the Node.js Collaborator Summit in London. It's a time where our maintainers roll up their sleeves and do some good planning and problem solving. So I want to wish everyone a great couple of days. I wish I was there. And want to thank our friends at Bloomberg who are hosting our friends at that event. Michael, I don't know if you have anything to add from the Node project there.
I don't. I'm unfortunately missing it as well, but I think it'll be a good session. Lots of good topics that have been submitted, and there is some ability to join virtually. So if people could make it there, they can try that as well.
That's right. And my only other, I think, announcement is, let's see, right as soon as this meeting ends, we have our standards collab space information on our public calendar, which is, there's a link on our website. You need to navigate there quickly. So those are my news updates today.
Yeah, and along those lines, the meeting happened yesterday, but we have a security meeting on Mondays too that I encourage folks to join if that's of interest to you, and check the calendar for our other exciting meetings, data viz and all that good stuff. Great. Any other announcements from anyone?
Yeah, just two real quick. No new travel fund requests for us to review. Just want to make sure people are aware that we're watching that. And the second is that it's election season. So as everyone here knows, we work to get our election calendar all sorted, and as a result, we're doing all the board elections at the same time. So the elections for the CPC directors is now open. There's a GitHub issue tracking that, which I linked to in the meeting notes. If anyone has any questions, you should totally reach out to me, and I'll help you out.
Great. Excellent. Cool. So if we are moving on, the next item on the agenda is board meeting updates. I don't know if we have anything from the board.
The only thing is we're changing our board meeting dates. We used to meet the 3rd Friday of every month. We're moving it to the 4th Friday just because it was always cutting it close when our financials come in, to sort of balance those out and make any corrections. So we are moving to the 4th Fridays.
Okay, great. So next on the agenda is waiting on legal info issue labels. I don't know if anybody has any updates on any of these. We got developed process for OpenJS to handle certificate renewals. Yeah, these are all fairly old. Is there anything new on these?
Yeah, I can do a little. I'll make a note to do some cleanup like that. Certificate renewals is sorted, which is great. But I'll look through the other ones and see if there's anything to update.
On that one, I may be misremembering. I was kind of thinking like maybe that was like to tidy up some documentation or something to document how projects ask for that or get it, or maybe that's stuff. I don't know.
Yeah, I just need to add a short README to our documentation, and I think that'll close that out. Yeah.
Great. Next on that list of labeled issues is waiting on staff update. We got a couple more of these old ones here, loopback and nonviolent communication training. Nothing new?
Yeah, no updates there. I don't think on either, so.
Okay, great. And then the last label list is waiting on website update, which there's no issues there. So great. So if I get into the regular agenda here, the first item is 1277. This is create new ecosystem sustainability program. Robin, do you want to comment on this at all, and particularly what we need to do to move forward?
Yeah, I think we've covered it in a couple of meetings already. We have the issue, have been just receiving a lot of positive feedback. There's been some questions in the email thread. I think the latest update we have is we've always talked about it being non-exclusive. And since we've opened the issue, we have node source interested in participating. Thanks, Adrian. So that's super exciting. So, I think we're probably ready to move forward. The next step, assuming that we have CPC consensus and support, is to then bring it back to the board of directors for a vote to approve and start executing. I'm in tandem, assuming it was going to pass, working with our legal team to develop a new contract around that as well. So that's getting close.
Great. All right, so we'll take that to the board meeting this month.
I think what we'll do is do it by mail, is what we had discussed in our last board meeting, just to expedite that. So.
Okay, great.
Cool.
Does
All right,
this
excellent.
need to have, like, I'm just wondering, does the issue make it clear that it's asking CPC members for, like, consensus or not?
This is a really good question, Michael. I think we bump into this on a regular basis for things that are issues and not pull requests. We kind of like struggle to formalize an issue into like like this, this has been agreed upon, because we don't really have a good process. I mean, we don't have like, the process isn't as clear for us software nerds as a pull request is. So I don't know what the governance actually says. And I think that's a good question. I'm actually not sure how to move forward with this. And every time we do things with an issue, it's the same problem. I'll add.
I can add my 2 cents. Like, I think for me, it would be as straightforward as either making sure that, like, somewhere if we think an issue is good enough, having somewhere in the issue saying, like, hey, CPC, sounds like everybody's in favor, we'll assume consensus unless anybody objects by blah date.
Okay.
Or, you might do that through email if we have like a CPC mailing list. Another one would be to say, hey, like, this issue's been open, we're going to assume consensus unless blah, 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 right? And that would be like that would make it clear, right? Like, everybody, the question's been asked, and it's like, you got a deadline, and then if nobody objects, it's like, yeah, we assume consensus, because, like, we don't need to hear yeses, we just have to hear no concerns.
Yeah, and I wonder too. I mean, we used to have a process of, like, proposals, and I don't want to, we've been talking about this for a while, so I don't want to delay it too much further. But should it be something that is, like, included in project resources on the repo, which then we would have a PR open for it.
And Michael mentioned we do make decisions on email as well, like with new project applications and things like that. So.
Yeah, and I'm not even commenting in terms of it being a blocker, but, like, should it be something that is in the repo that is outlined and made clear for folks looking for project resources, essentially. Sorry, Toby, I keep interrupting you.
No, I think you're right. I do think from a practical point of view, there is an open email thread already on this topic. And maybe sort of like formalizing the vote through that would be like a good step to make this fast.
Okay.
Because we've been talking about this for a while at this point, and I think there's consensus to move forward. I do agree that it would be nice also to have an FAQ about this, because, like, people have been asking some fairly good questions. And I think we have good answers to them, but they're kind of like spread all over the place. And so
we'll
I
kind
have
of a whole marketing bomb, build of materials around this. Yeah, for sure.
I mean, that works too. I kind of like agree with Joe that it would be nice to have like some kind of like structured thing where this is described. Like
it will
after the vote.
After the vote, I was going to say yes.
It's not,
Yeah,
not a
that's
vote, it's just like confirming consensus, right?
Confirming
Like,
consensus.
Exactly, yeah,
Copy
and-
Yeah,
that.
I'm sorry
yeah.
for the language.
like
Yeah.
ideally, I think in my mind would be to make that comment in here, like in this public issue, because I think in the future, if anybody comes back and says like, well, hey, where did we agree to this? It'd be nice to have this issue that you can point back to, like, hey, we achieved consensus here. So like having something at the end that says like, hey, it looks like we have consensus across the CPC. Anybody have any objections? And then if it was me, I would also email the CPC saying, by the way, you know, we're assuming consensus in this issue. Just that way, like if somebody doesn't see the issue, they got the email, but we have the public place where it's like, yep, we said we were going to get consensus. Nobody complained, so we're good, right?
This is great. The way W3C does this, which I really like, is asking for people who want to dissent to show up, but saying that a +1 is not required, but appreciated or something like this. And this is actually also kind of useful to get people to go look at the thing and +1 it if necessary.
Yeah.
So that's good. I like I'm gonna send an email confirming consensus, post any outstanding questions, and then I'll leave it open a week. I think we thought we would have it open a week. I feel like, yeah, we have been talking about it a long time, and I would love to get money in maintainers' hands as quickly as possible. So.
I think that sounds good. I think we should still aim to bring it to the board this month, and you know, by email or what have you. But yeah, give it a week to allow folks to object if I don't expect them to, but Toby?
No, do we agree to put the comment and point the email to +1 or -1 the comment?
Yeah, that's what I took, confirming
Okay, good.
consensus on the
Because I think
yeah.
that's what Michael asked for, and I think it's a reasonable ask.
Yeah,
And I
that's
think that the
exactly what I
points
wrote. in my
Okay, great,
notes.
wonderful. Are you gonna do both, Robin, or would you want like Joe, I, or anyone else to actually do the comment? Not that it matters, I'm just asking. Just make sure that
I
you're not
love
waiting
the
on us.
official blessing to come from the CPC, so, you know.
Okay,
having
so
it come from
I'm
you
happy to
would
do,
be
I'm
nice.
happy to put a comment.
Okay, awesome, thank you so much.
Great.
Mhm.
All right, excellent. Moving on then. All right, so this next one is resolved, so I don't know if this needs to be talked about. 1274. Oh, it's already closed and everything. So season of docs is moving on. Next up is 1272. This is the Jest charter review. This has been open for a month. We got 2 thumbs on there, but I don't know if folks have really taken a look at this. I've been a little bit absent, so I'm not sure. Anybody have any comments or anything on this issue?
So I made a few comments on the Jest pull request itself, and I'm not sure that they've been addressed.
Okay.
That's the last time I looked. That was the status.
Okay, great. Yeah, I'm looking right now. Mateo gave an LGTM, but yeah, I see your comments in here last month. Although there is a commit after that, but nobody, you don't have a lot of replies. You got a little bit, but okay. So I don't know if you want to double back on that at all, or how you want to move forward. So it's been open a month, so it would probably be good to help them get that over the finish line.
Yeah, fair.
I'll
take a quick look right now.
Great. Yeah, I mean, maybe just a comment like have these been addressed? Should we still be reviewing? What's the status? Great. So I'm going to move on. The next item is 1263. Toby, you open this for document best practices for org project management. Anybody got comments on this? I see Toby, you commented last 2 weeks ago. Proposing a joint session with Express.
Yeah, we had a conversation last CPC call about this, where we agreed that it would be nice to have some sort of like best practices of what documents to have where and how to organize this. And Express was going through this, and I think Wes offered that Express could be sort of like the guinea pig for this. And I think Ulysses, who's actually on the call, and Wes were to get back to us and sort of schedule a session. Is that, Ulysses, is my remembering kind of?
If I remember well, I think that was the intention. So yeah, I will talk with Wes and see when we can schedule a session. So yeah, sounds like the next step.
Great. Yeah,
All
and
right,
I see
cool.
I posted the issue to the comments or the issue in the Express admin asking John if they're available. So all right, keep us posted on that, and we can do an ad hoc session or a working session to dig into that a bit. Great. Next on the agenda is 12:53. Adrian, this is the annual ecosystem report. Anybody have an update on this one? Oh, I see a PR.
I think we can resolve that one. Ben, thank you for creating the repo. So next task for the initiative will be basically handled at the new repo. The first issue that I'm going to create this week is to establish meetings and cadence for meetings to work on this with the interesting folks. And yeah, so we need to merge the pull request, attach it there. So help me out, you can do it. And then I will go from there.
Great.
Excited about this one. Yeah.
Well, it's finally happening. So yeah.
Oh, so cool.
Can you paste the PR you mentioned in the chat if you're asking for people to?
Yeah, it's in the issue. Let me. Okay.
Yeah. And it's basically just adding it to the list of projects. What do you call them? Collab spaces.
Collab spaces. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, great. So Michael, I'll let you review that if you want, and then if you want to merge it.
I already approved it, so like.
Oh, great.
I was just making sure that I had to help it along.
Squash and merge.
Adrian, since I wonder if we get the dates. I'm speaking at the Linux Foundation Open Source Summit in a couple of weeks. Maybe if we can get the dates open, I can include it in my deck as well for timing.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. And I'm going to close this issue too. Great. Look at that. Moving stuff forward. Cool. All right.
Hey folks, just a quick second. Like Trot is trying to join the meeting and can't for some reason. Rich. They just commented on
He's probably trying to join the Zoom that's in the template. He needs to go to the calendar. Yeah, I just opened an issue at the beginning of this meeting that we need to update the template with the new Zoom link. And I even included a link to the node meeting artifacts file where it exists. Somebody just needs to update it.
So I just copy pasted today's the Zoom thing right into the issue.
Great.
We'll see if that.
Excellent.
Someone need to give him the LFX link in that chat. In the Slack chat.
Yeah. All right. Well, somebody managed that on the back end. I'm going to keep moving along, assuming that Rich will join us soon. The next item is 12:47. Google Season of Docs. Any update on this or where we're at?
I can speak to this one. We'll just give an update here and also mention that I removed the CPC tag from this one because I don't think it's, we'll need to talk about it again. But yeah, so we went ahead and applied. We did all the things that we need to do. And I think we find out, if memory serves, April next week, maybe the 10th, I think, if we've received funding or not. If we do receive funding, then I'll be working really closely with Claudio about accomplishing this work. And if we don't receive funding, we won't think about this again until next year. So yeah, fingers crossed.
All right, great. Thank you. I'm gonna move on. The next item here, which maybe we can close this one too, is 1243, community voting members. I don't know if this was even involved in the Simplify Elections work or what folks think about this. Hey, Rich, glad you made it. Yeah, so I don't know, maybe we encourage folks to think about this and comment on the issue or something. Or maybe we don't make any changes and we just close the issue and it's fine. For folks who are unaware, that we have a couple of voting member types that are often confused and sort of, I'm not really sure. I get the differences in theory, but in practice, they're kind of just the same.
We did simplify on the CPC board directors, because we used to
Yeah.
have like tertiary and
Yeah,
others.
so those are all just CPC board directors now, right?
Correct,
Okay,
yeah.
great.
This is a worthy effort, I think, to dedicate some cycles to. You know, I think we probably can do this, and I think now that we've gotten the election stuff sorted, or at least one round, the election calendar sorted, and we've done some other things, maybe this is worthy of a working session.
Yeah, Ben, if I could ask a favor of you, can you look at when these when these roles would be up for re-election? And we should maybe think like a month out, like that should be a deadline, either we decide or not.
Yes, that would be October 1st.
Oh, okay, so we got plenty of time.
Plenty of time, yep.
Okay, great. Okay, well, should I add like a potential working session label to this, right? We have that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What is that label called? CPC working session. Great. All right, cool. So we'll consider that for an upcoming working session and make some decisions there. That being said, I encourage folks to think about it and put a comment in there if you have any thoughts. You know, I think it would make things simpler and easier probably. All right, cool. Moving on. Next one is refined CPC definition of consensus, issue 1241. Anybody got any updates on this? There's been some comments. There's a pull request.
Yeah, I did put a pull request in since the last meeting. And I can see there's been some discussion back and forth. I guess Toby, you have like a rewording suggestion, the second part, right?
Yeah, and you even have a blocking change requested here if you want to elaborate, Toby.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I was in a bad mood over the weekend. I blocked a bunch of things. Apologies. No, sincerely. No, I think what I blocked, no, what bothered me was the language that you used. It was just like, oh, this is kind of like weird. And then I dug into it. And I'm like, oh, that's actually the language in the charter. And so then I felt really stupid, which same thing happened with Ben, by the way, for like the other thing that we didn't talk about. And so I think the point that that the reason I blocked is I don't think we need to have this stuff and both in the charter and in the governance doc at the same time. We need one source of truth and referencing that source of truth. And so either like my suggestion was either we fix the language in the charter as part of this pull request, or we don't, but we certainly don't copy it over. So that's why I blocked.
Yeah, I totally agree. One place, anytime we can find where there's two places of the same thing, we should, you know, trim it down to one.
Yeah, I'm happy to add that. I think I commented earlier on, like, once we have agreement on this, we can figure out what we do with the other place. So I'm happy to add that in if we're agreed on.
I totally.
And I can add in the second part, like, and it would be good to discuss, like, should we just delete it from the charter? Or, you know,
if you think it makes sense to reference it to the other one, that's fine. You know, if deleting it leaves some sort of gap and you want to say for more information on consensus, see this.
I think the charter, like, isn't there some distinction on like updates to the charter require board approval and
They
updates
do.
to governance don't?
Charter, though, it's pretty smooth process, though. It's not.
Right, but like, for example, if we thought this didn't need to be reviewed by the board, if we change it in the future,
Yeah.
then we could leave it in the governance. If we're like, oh, no, this has to be reviewed by the board every time, then we should move it. I'm just using that as a way to decide which one, maybe it makes sense to have the one copied.
Yeah, I think the things that are less important should not require board approval, so we should move it to wherever that makes sense, which it sounds like governance. I think also we could just create a follow-on PR that removes it from the charter, and then we can point the board to like, oh, we made this update and we don't need it here. Please approve this change we made. I think it'd be pretty painless. So essentially two PRs, but go ahead. Sorry, Toby.
No, the way I try to approach this with a code of conduct stuff is to have high level policy language somewhere, and more concrete sort of like implementation of the policy in a different document, precisely for addressing that question. And I feel like decision making, and sort of like what we vote on and how that actually works, is high level, like like voting and decision making is high level policy and belongs in the charter. And then like the actual implementations details should go in the governance doc. So to the question of like where does the actual decision making policy belong, in my opinion, it makes sense if it's in the charter, regardless of whether that makes it a little harder to get changed or not, just because it's clear that this is a high level policy way of how we think about like how we make decisions. So that's my take on this. And I think I wrote something in the, I'm trying to find where that issue is right now. Actually, which issue is this?
This is excuse me, 1241.
Why am I not
But it's
finding
also a
it?
pull request, which is 1281.
Oh, that's why I'm not finding it. Okay. Yeah, and Michael, to your point, I did remember bumping on that comment after having made those comments. I'm sorry for, like, it wasn't a different issue, and I saw it. It's just like, so yes, that's 1281.
I think really just if we could decide here, which one do we want to leave it in? And if the text I have is good, regardless, I'll move it to wherever we should put it and delete the other one like that. I was hoping we could get to like, yeah, this language looks good, and then I can mess with where it goes. So
did you look at the comment I made in like the suggested language for voting?
I just saw that today, so I really haven't had
Okay.
a chance to read through it.
So I mean, I looked at kind of like the language that's in the charter for the voting bit, and it's full of things that, in my opinion, are kind of like unclear and that don't really express how we think about things or actually do them. And so I made a suggestion to like refine this to like specifically when we actually vote, what happens.
This seems very specific, though, in like
I agree.
proposal to modify existing policies or processes. Like it seems to be like this is a specialization of, in particular, for our existing policies and processes. This is a tweak to what we would normally do, right? Because, for example, like, does this apply? So, for example, we talked earlier about like, hey, we're just going to confirm consensus on the proposal around the Hero Devs program, right? If somebody said, no, would you then be proposing that like, hey, we need 2/3 of the voting members to vote in favor versus the half?
If we cannot get consensus, yes. I mean, my point is we actually never voted on anything that I know of.
Okay, so
like we always, I mean, except elections, right? But that's separate. Like But all of the decision making is consensus driven, and we've never had a case where we disagreed about something. And so if we're refining like the language around when we do voting, we should be super explicit that we have voting to essentially unlock situations where we cannot get to consensus and we cannot move forward. And so the idea is make it hard to unlock, to go against people objecting, but also prevent one person from derailing the whole organization by blocking on something that everyone else agrees to move forward. So essentially, that's what, for me, this is where we vote. And so if the idea was, let's actually spell out how the organization actually works on paper, then the truth is we do everything by consensus, and sometimes, possibly on very specific issues, we would need to vote, and let's spell that out. And let's be clear that we want to favor the status quo in such circumstances, but we also want to be able to unblock the organization moving forward if we want to. That's what I was trying to achieve here.
Right. So I think that like even in the and I don't really care about the specific wording, but like I think in the wording that was there, it already said like if we can't reach consensus, we vote. The main difference between what you have in the text down below are two things. I think one is it says a proposal to modify existing policies or processes. Like I would take that line out because like if this is meant to apply to everything, that could cause confusion that it only applies to modifying policies and processes, which is not everything we talk about, right? So I take that line up. And the other change that I see is like you're proposing that we use 2/3 instead of 50%. And that's just different from like, I'm sure somewhere in our existing documentation, it says 50%, or at least it does where I drew this language from. Like, I think some of it might.
Oh, totally. And I think
Yeah.
I think it doesn't make sense precisely because it's a last resort thing. And if it's a last resort thing, then we shouldn't make it difficult.
Node project is 50%, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, that's probably what is modeled on.
I mean,
Yeah, the
in
wording
general,
was very similar across. Like I'm actually going to go and propose these updates to the node wording because again, it's got some of the same challenges that we in the language that we had, I think, here.
Jordan.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it honestly depends on the category of decision and the best and worst case scenario of inaction. So like if there's a decision where inaction is likely to be a better result than the wrong action, then the percentage should theoretically be higher. If there's a decision where inaction is likely to be more harmful than the wrong choice, then it should be lower. And obviously we can't just ad hoc it every time. And I doubt anyone could like define, a rubric to work in every situation, but that's sort of the philosophy I would approach with it.
But then you've
yeah,
just
I
introduced a new
yeah.
decision-making step.
Well, I would
Also
almost
true.
read what Jordan said is like 50% might be the most reasonable balance because we don't know which of those two it's going to fall in. So 50 is like right down the middle, right? You need to have at least half the people. So it's no harder, no easier, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that like in the same way as the difference between a strict consensus and a rough consensus model is that in strict consensus, no one can object, but in a rough consensus, like as long as pretty much everyone's on board and no one like has a huge problem with it, you're good. And I think that's the sort of the difference between 50% and 2/3 to me is that like with 50%, you can have nearly half the group thinking it's the worst idea ever and still have it happen. With 2/3, if a third of the people think it's the worst idea ever and 2/3 are convinced, like that's probably a better decision than the one where it's half and half. And so that's why I was saying it depends on the context of the decision and the harm of making the wrong one. But like I agree with you, Robin, like adding a new decision point every time is very not a good idea for efficiency. But like, so it would only make sense to have two buckets if there was a objective rubric that wouldn't get to be debated. And it's just something automatically falls into a bucket. So I'm not actually suggesting two buckets. I'm just offering that philosophy as a way to think about it.
I'll throw up one more thought that came to mind is like, for any proposal, I can always invert it. And
Yeah, I speak about this, and this is
therefore,
exactly why the language is this way, by the way. But
right. Because if I invert the proposal is to do X, and then that fails, and I say, well, okay, I'm going to propose to not do X. And
yeah,
now you need to block, like, at least
I
the
talk
50
about this in
means
the
that there's-
comment,
Yeah.
Michael. This is exactly why I say it has to be driven by the status quo is what you want, which is why the language says if a proposal to modify or add an existing process of policies is not agreed to through consensus, right? In that case, you can go to vote, and for that you need more than 2/3, right? And this is precisely because I otherwise you get like depends on how you ask it. And this, by the way, is what like I mean. When I looked at the language, essentially, like my conclusion was the language, like if we ever have to vote on something, it's going to be at a moment of crisis, right? Because it means that we haven't succeeded to get consensus, okay? And then you look at the language and it is confusing as hell. Depending on how you voice the thing, there's like 5 different ways you can interpret it. And it's essentially like what is supposed to be a backstop to manage a crisis is going to help us manufacture a bigger one, right?
Yeah, but
And
quick
so,
question on voting. Are you talking about the voting members of the CPC? Because they
no.
No.
Completely out. Like I'm Swiss, so we have voting for all the things in elections, and they're 2 different things, right? So I'm strictly talking about voting on in case there is a decision that cannot be made. It has nothing to do with elections. Elections, like
I know,
like
but
what we have is
No, but
if you have a vote, who gets to cast a vote? Are they the regular members of the CPC? Or are they the voting members of the CPC?
the voting members, I would assume.
Mhm.
Because if not, like we have another problem,
I know.
which is why do we have voting members that are not? Or whatnot.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would be
Just
the
wanted
voting
to
members.
clarify because
No, but
sometimes
it's a good point.
consensus, sometimes the blocker could be a non-voting member, right? So then you kind of get into this. It's the way we do things already is consensus based on regular members. So,
Yes.
mhm.
yeah,
And
I
it
think
could even
like Toby, in your particular case, I would suggest that if we wanted to do the 2/3, that we basically say like the generic case is blah, right? Which is maybe the 50-50, but specifically for modifying an existing policies and processes, we've decided that it needs a higher threshold.
Right, but we never vote on anything else. So I hear you. And Jordan's point is absolutely right. Like, and the way this usually works, and Jordan's absolutely right about this, is you do 50-50 on everything, but like not a charter modification, for example, or 50, so you have the system, and if you look into governance structures, like they're structured in a way that you can decide to vote on a thing, and getting agreement to vote on a thing is requires 50% of people to agree, but then actually getting the motion through is going to require 2/3, right? So you can it's easy to get a vote and it's harder to get the vote across, for example, right? So all of these things exist in regular governance models. The point I'm trying to make here is we never vote except in crisis about something that's going to be like high, obviously, like super important, because if not, we would not be in a moment of crisis, right? In the moment of not being able to get consensus. Like we get consensus easily all the time. So the point is, whenever we vote on something, it's going to be something that matters, and it's going to be a crisis. That's what I'm trying to get across. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get across. And I'm fine not doing anything, by the way. It's just like, if we start to clean this up, I would rather we actually thought the problems through and made sure that the language that we have actually makes sense and follows what we do. That we don't have it in like multiple different places, and that it is not subject to being interpreted. Because I mean, frankly, if I ask a bunch of questions like, is the vote of present members or all members? Is the vote async or not? Is the vote of members present? Do we need a quorum to have a vote? The votes need to be announced in advance. Like, a simple majority more than 50%, or the answer was a bigger score. If majority is more than 50%, the abstentions counted. I mean, I have a list of this, right? These are questions that we need answers to if we want to write something down. Or we could just
Yeah.
leave it as is. I don't care. Like, I'm just saying, like, you know, but like what we have is not great, is my point. And so if you want to fix it, let's like do the work of fixing it.
Can you, can you take over this PR and throw a straw man together?
Well, I wrote, voting should only be done as a last resort if a proposal to modify existing policies and processes or add new ones cannot reach consensus after a reasonable period of discussion. A voting member can call for objections to be overruled through an asynchronous vote. Like, I'm trying to be extremely specific here for reasons, right? If this call is seconded by another voting member, right? So one person can't call, you need at least someone else to say, okay, let's do a vote, right? And an asynchronous vote must be organized, right? And this is like going to be annoying. Like Ben's going to have to do all of this stuff, right? For the objection to be overruled, right? And thus the proposal to pass, at least 2/3 of all voting members must vote in favor. Right? And it then says this is designed to make it difficult to change existing policies and processes or add new ones without consensus, but prevent someone from completely blocking process through objections. That's the design of this, right?
That sounds great.
See the one thing I like, are we convinced everything is covered by policies and processes? Is that the only thing we ever need to get consensus on?
It's a good question.
Like, I'm not disagreeing with this. I just,
Accepting a new project would be one.
That is a good point.
right, like that's my main point. Like this proposal, I can easily see the rationale for policies and processes. But my concern is like, that's not the only thing that we get consensus on. So that's why I was suggesting like we could have the generic one that says, generally, this is our consensus, like, and maybe that's 50% because like you can invert those. And like, if I propose the opposite, but specifically for modifying existing policies and processes, we've raised the bar. And so here it's outlined like you actually need 2/3, right?
So would that be everything that Toby just said, but we would take out the 2/3 part and then just at the, you know, add for changes to policy and process, this requires 2/3? Is that the change?
What I heard Michael say is we'd have 50% for everything, but 2/3 for policies and processes. I actually, like, Michael, you make a good point, and I struggled to exactly find what it is that we vote on. And you're right, there are other things. So I agree with you that we need to account for these other things. I think that whenever we vote, it is because we haven't got an agreement. So it always should be 2/3. That would be my point.
Yeah.
But the problem is then we have to decide what the status quo is. And so that's what makes it difficult. To Jordan's point earlier, it's easy for policies and processes. It's actually okay for a project. It could be refusing, like not including a project. But maybe we just say, like that whatever version is the status quo needs to, like, goes against the status quo, need to be 2/3. Sorry, Chris, please go ahead.
Well, I actually put my hand down, but I'll go ahead and say it anyway. Something to consider, and I think it's maybe come up a little bit in this conversation, specifically when talking about if doing nothing, the consequences of inaction. But there's a part of the charter of the CSS working group that I really like that says that first of all, it leaves it to the chairs to call a vote. So there's no ambiguity there. But it's only if consensus isn't achieved and it's necessary for progress. So there's a condition that you don't just go to a vote just because there's a deadlock. It's that there has to be a justification for voting on a matter because a decision must be made in a timely manner.
That's a great point, Chris. And like Joe's right that we should move to private time, but that's a great point. And I think part of the problem is precisely that we don't have clarity, like all of this bits and pieces all over the place, because I entirely missed this. And the voting thing doesn't actually address this properly.
All right,
Like,
can we move this back
yes.
to the issue and we'll move on?
Agreed.
But I think it's been a good conversation. I think if we can capture some of that back in the issue, that would be great, or the pull request, whatever the case may be, and then try to move it forward. I think it'd be good.
Agreed.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm gonna skip the rest of the agenda, even though I was looking forward to talking about a couple of those things. But what about working session next week? What do
My
y'all want to do?
suggestion was to work on Ben's proposal around end of life and
life
maintenance
cycle, yeah.
and that stuff.
I would just add, we have used some working sessions on that, so unless there are new people who attend, then it probably would not be, you know, worthwhile to do that, right?
That's a fair point.
Mhm.
Whatever you're more comfortable with, Ben. Otherwise, we can actually take this conversation to the one we just had now to a working session.
I suggest that. I think from what I've seen, I think we can try and resolve most of the issues in GitHub, and if not,
Works for me.
maybe.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, and then we just talked about the voting member thing too. So we can start with this conversation and then just go through whatever else has the working session label. All right, great. Well, with that, let's call it a wrap, stop recording, and